I'm Howard Riina. I'm visiting from New York, and as part of the FAANS Leadership Series, I'm here in Phoenix to interview Michael Lawton, professor and chairman of the Barrow Neurologic Institute and CEO of the Barrow Brain and Spine. Was that it?
Yeah, I think you got enough.
So, Michael, was very special when you asked me to come and interview you for the FAANS lecture series on significant individuals in neurosurgery. And so there's a lot of ground that we can cover this afternoon. We've got a beautiful day. It's not a lot of pressure on us. You're obviously flying out of town tomorrow, as you're apt to do. But we have you sort of just to ourselves for the next few hours so we can ask you some questions about neurosurgery. Now, obviously, before you came to Phoenix, there's a lot of parts in your career that we can cover. But before you came to Phoenix, you really established yourself in neurosurgery, and particularly open vascular neurosurgery at UCSF. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of vascular neurosurgery at UCSF and how you sort of made it your own before coming to the Barrow?
So yeah, it's a good place to start. I remember the day like it was yesterday. I was looking at a job in Los Angeles at the House Ear Institute, and I was waiting for a contract to be sent back when Dr. Spetzer came into his room. I was his chief operating, and he said, "Have you signed that contract yet at the House?" And I said, "No, why?" And he said, "Well, I just got a call from Mitch Berger, and he's looking for a vascular surgeon at UCSF." And that was it. So I immediately met Mitch, liked Mitch, took the job, went off to San Francisco. And I think the reason it was a success for me was because it was an abandoned program. It was, Charlie Wilson was the guy doing the aneurysms there. And Charlie had come to the conclusion that endovascular was the future. He had Grant Haishima, Randy Higashida, Van Hallback. They were doing groundbreaking stuff. And he just said, "Okay, you guys take all this. And if you need me, I'm here." And the program just kind of languished. There was no dedicated open vascular guys. So when I came, there were all these cases. There was a lot of interest in developing that program. And it was just filling a void. And almost from day one, actually before my day one, I actually got called by one of the attendings there who was on call, got a giant aneurysm, didn't want to come in and operate. So I was in the middle of unpacking, and I had to go in and do my first case even before my start date.
Well, that's a perfect start to your vascular career, particularly in San Francisco. I think our friendship goes back a long time. And one of the things that I've always been struck about you, and we're going to get into a lot of this over the next hour or so, but is you have these, you set up goals for yourself. And so when you attack a problem, in your mind, I think you come up with a way of building towards a solution. And I know you had these 5-year plans when you were in San Francisco. Can you talk us through the initial 5-year plan and what you set out to achieve? We all know how it turns out, but in the beginning, particularly for the young trainees that are watching these videos, and maybe some of the more established people, your process is an important aspect of your practice, and I'd like to hear how you break it down.
Well, so you're right. I do. You and I have talked a lot about this, our 5-year plans, and my first 5-year plan was very simple. I was completely green, 0 experience out of residency. I was being given a directorship of a program, and it was simple. I wanted to dive in and kind of march up that learning curve and do all the technical growth that I needed to get to that place. I was coming out of the BNI. I had been trained by Spetzler, and I kind of knew where I needed to get to. And it was all about just trying to climb the curve as fast as I could and as high as I could. And I just put my nose down and did every case that came in the door. And it was, the first 5 years was simple, just get good.
So you achieved that, obviously. You developed, I would say, a national and international reputation in San Francisco. I'm not sure how many of the 7 series come out of San Francisco, the first 2 or the first 3?
First 2.
All right, so my facts are good. So the first 2, what I didn't know until very recently, that each 7 series book has an overall theme. And so how do you arrive at the themes? Do you have a grand vision of all the themes, or do you have specific themes that you've sort of brought in along the way?
Yeah, great question, because I don't know if you remember this, but the first 7 book that I wrote, I came to you and I said, should we do this? And you said, definitely, it needs to be done. And you were very encouraging, and you kind of pushed me to do this. And
I'm not sure I can take credit for that, but okay.
I distinctly remember. So the first one was aneurysms, because that was sort of the beginning. That's sort of like the basic. And then when I did that, the feedback was so great. Like, I really enjoyed people coming up to me and saying, thank you, this book made a difference, or I like the way you described X, Y, or Z. So I felt like that was gratifying, and I wanted to keep going. And so the AVMs was the next logical thing that was consuming so much of my creative and intellectual energy in San Francisco with the volume. So that was the natural number 2. But then, I began to think, okay, this 7th theme is working. People like it. I actually had to twist a few arms at TEMA to actually allow me to use the 7 title, because they rejected it at first. But the themes kept coming, and I have this concept of 7 squared, which is that I want to do 7 books of 7 in my lifetime, so that by the end of my career, when I hang it up, there'll be 7 in the series. And so that's kind of been what I've been marching along towards. And the bypass book came after the AVM book. The cavernomas thing came when I moved to Phoenix and just got smothered in cavernous malformations. And part of being here is doing tumors. And so already in my head, I've been thinking about how to do a tumor book that's focused on the vascular aspects of it.
Now, certainly the anatomical neurosurgical problem, aneurysm, AVM, cav-mal, those are areas of focus. But each book has a different sort of thematic approach, which I think you've used to develop your ideas or your thinking about a problem. I mean, there's topography in some, there's the connectome that has worked its way in that. Could you expand a little bit on that? Because they're different. The aneurysm book is different from the AVM book. It's not just 7 aneurysms and 7 AVMs. There's a way of thinking that I'm trying to get to here.
So I love metaphors. It's kind of how I think about problems. And so for each of the books, I have a metaphor for each one. And that's been fun to not only think about as a way to help understand or explain the topic, but also to weave in from a expressive point of view. Like when I talked about AVMs and I came up with the war metaphor, I realized that it was fun to write into the book all the language of war, the campaigns, the battle plans, the studying the enemy, all of this stuff just really helped me write the book. But the metaphor was what really was important. And for aneurysms, it was dancing, the choreography of thinking about steps one after the next and how you string those together to get to your goal. The one now, the 7 cavernomas, it's cartography. And the idea that, you have an idea of where you start and where you finish and how you develop a pathway from beginning to end. That's really what cavernoma surgery is. It's not so much the challenge of removing the lesion. It's how do you strategize your approach and how do you execute. And the map just brings all that together, all the triangles, the safe entry zones, the craniotomies, and so that really kind of fell into place for 7 cavernomas. And of course, for bypass, the architecture metaphor there was really it really worked, because my big idea there was you do the simple bypasses, the STA, MCA bypasses, which aren't very dramatic, but then you could take that and elevate, and in the same way that you could build a bridge that's a truss, or you could build a bridge that's a suspension, and the suspension has just such a more graceful and dramatic feel. And that's the same with bypass, to try and push people to intracranial bypasses rather than ECIC. So the architecture theme was good for that one too.
So this is some of the uniqueness about you that I think is important for people to understand, which is you came from this very, very strong neurosurgical background and this anatomical basis of surgery and approaching surgery. But when people think of surgery in general, they may say, well, surgery doesn't change all that much so quickly over periods of time. But you've actually built upon a very, very strong foundation. You've elevated vascular neurosurgery, and I think that's part of the appeal of you as an individual, and certainly for the School of Neurosurgery that you have now at the Barrow. Can you talk a little bit how difficult it's been to sort of build on what's already been there in neurosurgery? I mean, the books let people understand the thinking, but how to get surgery to the next level.
Well, it makes me think about when I was a resident, and I would try and write papers with Dr. Spetzler and his case, or his patients, and people would say, it's already been written. There's nothing more that you can say about hypothermic circulatory arrest, or about bypass surgery, or about basilar aneurysms. But I remember thinking, that may be true, but let me just try. And there was always a way to kind of dive a little deeper, kind of scrape beyond the surface and find something underneath. And that just became kind of my mantra, was that if we could just keep peeling away the layers, we're going to actually get to somewhere that's interesting. And whenever I feel like I was being told I couldn't find anything new, or that I should stop, I just would always keep peeling. And remarkably, I have been able to find some novelty in a lot of these areas. I didn't think that I could find that much in bypass, just as an example. And I remember when I started writing 7 bypasses, I expected it to be this very thin manual of how to do this. And it turned out to be my biggest, thickest book. And it's because I realized, not a lot was being said about the tissue handling, or about the stitch placement, or about, how you can bring these unusual arteries together. And, I just, it's like putting on the scuba gear and diving down another 10 or 20 feet. You just keep going and you keep going. If your gauge says you've got the oxygen, you just keep looking.
It's not unusual for me to go by a junior faculty member's office or the chief resident's office and see one of your books open with them reading up about getting prepped for one of my cases by reading how you would have approached it. And I thank you for that, number one. But two, I think these have become great tools, and your way of thinking and looking at things have been a guide for a lot of people. Now, you're in San Francisco, you've become hugely successful. People know you. I've tried to walk across the room at a lot of our national meetings, where the exhibit hall, and it's very hard to get 3 feet without somebody wanting to take a picture or have you sign one of their books or something like that. But you came to a point where the BNI was open. Dr. Spetzler was thinking about retiring, and there was going to be an opportunity at the Barrow. But you already were pretty set and very, very successful. And so take us through that big, I would say it was a seismic change in your life. I think you, not only did you uproot your family, but you also had to restart your career in a way. Can you tell us a little bit about that thought process?
Well, I hold you responsible for that, ripping me out of my comfortable roost, because as you recall, I had not made up my mind, and you invited me to Old Cello in the desert, and we were going to listen to the Rolling Stones and Neil Young and anyway, all these great bands. I was just going to come and hang out with you and Ann and Johnny and think through this whole opportunity. And within 10 minutes of landing in Palm Springs, you guys were on me to decide to take the offer and to move on. So I have to say I really struggled with the decision, because I love California, love San Francisco. I know Suzanne and all my family love the life that we had built there, and it was really hard to make that decision. But I always felt like San Francisco was wonderful, but it was preparing me for something bigger. And I felt like, when that opportunity landed on my lap, I felt like that was this opportunity I'd been waiting for. And this was this big thing that I was meant to go do. And it was hard, but I just felt like this was sort of destiny knocking. And I love Robert to death. And for him to invite me back was meaningful. To have trained at the Barrow and to lead it, that was meaningful. To have the resources that I sometimes felt were lacking in San Francisco to do all the other things that I wanted to do with my career. I saw those opportunities opening up. So I just, put it all together and was able to make the leap.
So the Barrow job is a different job, obviously. In San Francisco, we're purely vascular. We're focused on vascular. We're focused on open vascular. The Barrow job requires more of a vision, because it's vascular, it's tumor, it's movement disorder, it's neurology. It's a much bigger enterprise. It's a grander vision. How are you looking at that? And then we're going to get into some of the other things that you've done since at the Barrow. But when you had to, knowing you again, it wasn't a 5-year plan, but there was definitely a vision. There's a vision statement in here somewhere.
Yeah. Well, you have to remember, I was 20 years in practice doing the professor thing at a public university, a wonderful place, which I love. But I felt like I had done that. Like I had mastered that. And I wasn't really able to do all the other things that were going to stretch me and grow me. And so when I thought, okay, by taking this chairmanship job, first of all, I'm going from being a program or directing a program to being chair of a department. I have to think about all these other pieces of neurosurgery. But it was also just the idea that I could do all these other things, like lead the institute, develop new programs, build buildings, do all those things that as the CEO of the Institute, I would have that opportunity. That really excited me. And, I didn't really have a great sense of what it meant to be a CEO. But as I've been here and grown into the role, I think that's really a powerful opportunity that I'm so glad I took, because it's just, there's so many aspects to it, building up the other teams around you and growing the Institute so it can have the space and the resources to recruit and to accommodate. There just are so many parts of that job that I've enjoyed more than I expected. I love being a surgeon and I love the academic piece, but this has just opened new horizons that have been great.
Yeah, it's not a traditional chairmanship. It's very, very different. It requires a much greater vision. It requires you to develop some of these other areas just as intently as you would your own area of interest and expertise. But the underlying theme of the BNI, what the BNI is, at least to me as a former fellow and seeing the trainees that come out and seeing the interest in young people wanting to go to the BNI is that the BNI has an educational mission. And you're training future leaders in our specialty and in the peripheral specialties. And so how are you achieving that? I mean, I know you have a lot of ideas as far as residency training, helping people in different parts of the world that need to be trained that may not have access to hands-on training. How are you looking at all of these things?
The Barrow, when I thought about what that represented, was two things. The first is it really is a podium, and the second is it's sort of a bullhorn, and I'll explain what I mean. The podium piece is that, you know, you're kind of on this podium where the world looks at you and what you do. The way that, you know, for 34 years when Spetzler was the chair, everybody was kind of looking at how he did his surgery, who he was, how his patients did, all the videos, the 3D. I mean, it was really a highly visible platform for neurosurgery. So I felt like I had to step into that platform position and continue to perform at this very high level so that, you know, I could carry on the BNI legacy. But then the second piece is the bullhorn, which is, you know, teaching a really broad audience and trying to outreach to the world. And in the same way that, you know, in the Spetzler era, people were coming and spending time in Phoenix with observerships, you know, I felt like now we could kind of turn this thing upside down and continue that, but we could also start broadcasting out to the world the things that we're trying to teach. All of these opportunities on social media with video editing, presenting cases, all the artwork that comes from our neuro publications office, the textbooks, the writings that we do. All of these things can be kind of disseminated in the modern era with this bullhorn, which is the social media. And you know, I've really embraced that because you know, I feel like as a professor at UCSF writing papers, I was only reaching the people who would read the journals, and that was a really tiny piece. But when you expand your bullhorn and you start putting out all this other stuff on Twitter and Instagram, where people can just, you know, they can be grabbed by the artwork, or they can be grabbed by the highlight video. It's a really great medium to teach because it's small, it's digestible, it's really focused, and I think it's been working.
I mean, the Barrow has really expanded. It's really incorporated multimedia into training, into education, into broadcasting, as you referred to it in the bullhorn. But you also have this idea of this sort of worldwide virtual residency. You have some ideas in this area. I mean, I know we're not there yet, and I'm not sure how that gets implemented, but the Barrow sort of has the tools to do some of these things that many places honestly can't do.
Yeah, that's the big vision, is to see if you can create a community of neurosurgeons who just want to learn, and they're able to kind of log in, essentially, and be a part of that. And a great example is Barrow Base Camp. Robert would call us all in, and we'd do our 4:30 teaching rounds every day, and we'd review all the cases that were mailed in. And that was this magical hour where we would just see these incredible cases, this amazing pathology, and we would hear a master think through, how are we going to fix this, and what are the pros and cons of this approach or that approach. And so I continued that when he retired, and Base Camp really just was a way to capture that on film and then invite everybody else in. By capturing that and putting it out, it's like taking those 28 residents that are in the room with me or with Robert, and then inviting in hundreds more, whoever wants to tune in. And that's this idea of the virtual residency, is to take what we do, capture it, and then if anyone has an interest in it, invite them in. And the tools are there. All of the social media stuff, all of the ways that you can connect people by Zoom or other links, it's all there. So it's just a matter of the will. And I'm lucky to have people like Jared, who is filming this, work with me. And what's fun for me is to not only just like share what I do, but have the creative energies of guys like Jared and the others that we invite in this to really take that teaching hour and turn it into even something more important when we talk about philosophy or a theme like the learning curve in this season's episodes. It's really it's been really rewarding.
I like how it has seasons and episodes, and they're all set up. Let's talk a little bit about fundraising and how you keep this going and are able to expand some of these really ideas and thoughts that you have and making them a reality, including the buildings, which we know are quite expensive. What's your approach to fundraising? And obviously you've been very successful with it. Not that Robert wasn't, but you've actually taken it to the next level. Can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, well, we are sort of in this nice environment where we're only neurosciences at Barrow. We don't have to worry about urology or general surgery or internal medicine. And when I was at UCSF, I had one billionaire patient during my 20 years there. And when I took care of him and operated on him, before I even had a chance to ask him for help, he had already donated $1 million, and the foundation had taken it away and was going to pour that into a new building in the medical school. And that's just how it went. There was all of this tug of war between the donors and the mission of the medical school. And at a place like Barrow, we control that. I control that. I and my leadership group around me control that. So if we need more research space, we can make that happen. If we need more clinic space or an updated clinic space, we can make that happen. And if we need a brain tumor building, we can make that happen. And those have been what we've done. We built the Neuroplex, which is a new clinic and office space. We built the Ivy Brain Tumor Center, which is the brain tumor program headquarters. And the next one is going to be our Mind Exploratorium, where my thinking about this is that the way neurosurgery is going, it's about engineering, it's about neurotechnology, and we don't have the right team built right now for that. We're a bunch of clinicians, neurologists and neurosurgeons and neuroradiologists, and that's how we've traditionally done our work. But for us to get to the next level, we need engineers, we need computational neurosciences, we need cognitive scientists who understand the psychological and psychiatrical issues. And these are the people we got to pull into the fold. And in order to get them in, we've got to create an environment where they're just as at home as we are, and right across the street from the patient. So being at a place like this, you can take an idea like wanting to explore what the mind is and how it functions, how the brain functions as the mind, and then build a place where you can actually tackle that without all the competing forces that want to take that money for a medical school, without all of the infighting. You can just be more focused about the vision and trying to execute. Now, it is hard, you and I talk a lot about NYU and your $1 billion fundraisers, and the advantage of a traditional center like NYU is the scale is enormous, and being in a place like Manhattan is an incredible advantage. So we're definitely disadvantaged in many ways, but I think what's special is we just can control our destiny, and we can focus our effort so that the money that we raise actually gets directed to our agenda.
So I'm just going to take a little sort of diversion for a second. Your family, you have an amazing family. Obviously, our families are close, but tell us a little bit about your approach to family. Suzanne, amazing. Part of the whole Barrow family now. You're sort of the patriarch and matriarch of the, with Suzanne, of the whole Barrow family. Tell me about your, how you pull the residents into that, how you develop young faculty, and how your own family has sort of helped absorb, all these other people into this whole Barrow landscape.
Yeah, well, I would be nothing without my family. My wife Suzanne keeps me whole. I'm, as she would say, wildly out of balance. So she helps to try and bring me back into some sense of balance. And she's the glue of the family. If it weren't for all the work that she does, I would have a different life outside of neurosurgery. So I am incredibly indebted to her for all she does. And I'm lucky. My kids are great. They're completely supportive. They're wonderful. They've grown up. And I love being with them. I feel like, between neurosurgery and my family, I don't have much time for anything else. So I just feel so lucky that my family is tended so well and such great individuals. With regard to like the Barrow family, I think in some ways it's been just a matter of continuation. Like I always loved the parties at Dr. Spetzler's house and the Olympics and the Grand Canyon hikes and all the things that create the culture here that everybody loves so much and talks about so much. It's been fun to just take that torch from Robert and just grab it and keep running with it. And
people really want to be part of it. Even people that are from outside, they all want to be part of it.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I feel it at a couple of key moments. Like whenever we go to New York as a softball team and we compete in that event, the intensity there and the camaraderie and the pride is so strong. When we pull ourselves out of the Grand Canyon in May and after hiking for 25 miles, the culture is so strong. The graduation events, we've turned those into big, special, splashy things, and that's really strong culture. But even the little stuff, just the barbecues and the hanging out around the front desk in the OR, and the little things. We just had Neuro Night, and there were about a dozen residents who came backstage and hung out with Mark McGrath, and we were doing some Nickelback shots with the band, and those are the moments that are just so special. And I think I feel like we have a lot of those special moments. I know every program has those, but we have ours, and they just feel great. And I've just been trying to continue those on.
So there are a lot of changes happening in medicine right now, and some people are down on medicine. They're maybe down on surgery, but medicine is changing a lot. What's your feeling about the future of medicine, about new technologies? How do you look at it as not only from your own role, but personally?
Well, I curse you because you're leading the charge to retire me and make me extinct. But no, actually, I'm an engineer by college training, as you are, and I share your desire to be forward thinking and to kind of push that technological envelope. And I unfortunately, I've kind of emerged on the wrong side of the divide in many ways. I'm holding on to an old art, whereas like endovascular technology is pulling away with new devices and new technology. So it feels awkward for me. I like the engineering and I embrace that, but I just ended up on the wrong side because I just love the surgical art so much and can't let it go. But that said, I am so excited about the future because I feel like we are on the cusp of some incredible changes. Like, you would never know it from my practice and the things I write about, but I am a closet functional neurosurgeon at heart, because when I see the stent trodes and Neuralink and these endovascular devices that like the pipeline and all the intrasaccular devices and all of the stuff that goes into these advances, I mean, that to me is so exciting. And I think this is going to be explosive. When we can treat depression and anxiety, when we can treat overeating with deep brain stimulation, when we can implant things that will allow us to encode or decode brain signals and drive devices, I mean, that to me makes neurosurgery this small little specialty thing to this enormous thing that's going to have this profound impact on the world.
So there we are. There we have it. So we're going to talk a little bit about where you come from and your background. I know you're from Illinois. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And I don't know too much.
Chicago.
Exactly. So it's a big city. I mean, I was born in Brooklyn. It's which some people think Brooklyn is a bigger city than Chicago, which I think it is population-wise. But let's talk a little bit about your background growing up on the North Shore of Chicago and how that led you to, you mentioned engineering, that led you to college and led you to engineering school.
Yeah, so I grew up in Wilmette, which is just 10 miles north of Chicago. I went to New Trier High School, probably one of the biggest high schools in the country. It's public. Huge place. My class was 1,250 students.
Wow.
Very competitive. I always wanted to be a star athlete, but I could never make the varsity because there were so many people trying to make the team. So I learned early that I should study and work in my academics. And I wanted to leave the Midwest. I wanted to go to an Ivy League college, in part because I saw how my mother, she dropped out of college because of early family life and had to fight and claw her way back through her educational journey. And so I wanted to, go in strong. So I picked Brown. And
so why did you pick Brown? I mean, there's a lot of Ivies.
Yeah, I picked
They're
Brown.
all a little different.
Yeah, I know your daughters and you have a affinity for Penn, and your wife. And but I picked Brown because of the engineering. One piece of advice my dad gave me that was good was to get an engineering degree, start with that because then you could branch out in any of a number of directions. And so I took the 8 Ivy League schools and I pulled out the ones that had good engineering programs, and then I focused on those. And in the end, Brown just seemed like a really interesting place to be.
So this was biomedical engineering.
Yeah, and they had a biomedical engineering program because I kind of wanted to go into medicine. My grandfather was a physician, my uncle was a physician, so there was a family thread, and I really liked that. And so I went there and I became a biomedical engineer. I took some great courses in neural engineering and studying biomaterials. And at that point of my life, it was 1980s, 1982 to 1986, the Jarvik 7, Total Artificial Heart, was on the cover of Time magazine, and William DeVries was the surgeon putting those in. And I said, this is me. This is what I want. This is going to be my life. And that's why I went to medical school, was to do that. And so I went off to Hopkins, and I can remember the reason I'm not a cardiac surgeon was because I knocked on Bruce Wright's door and asked him for a job after my first year in medical school. And he said, sorry, my lab's full. I can't take you. And so I shuffled away, and the next best thing I could find was a neurosurgical job in the department, and got spun that way. So
so that took you off of the cardiac route.
Yeah, that took me off the cardiac route, and I was interested in engineering. My first, if you Google me or PubMed me, my first paper is on spinal cord stimulators because I was trying to get my engineering into neurosurgery, and that was sort of how I landed in neurosurgery. And so I just got down that path, and it's just serendipity. I quickly met Henry Bram, and he was interested in brain tumors and angiogenesis. So then I started thinking about blood vessels, and I met Spetzler when he came to Hopkins as a visiting professor and got really wowed. And so, it just spun from there.
So let's talk about that for a second. So here you are, you're graduating from Hopkins. A lot of people might say, well, you trained at Hopkins or the MGH or Penn or something like that. How did you wind up coming to Phoenix? I mean, how did that happen? What did you know about Phoenix?
I knew nothing about Phoenix except that in 8th grade, I took a family trip and we spent a week, and I actually loved it here. So I had fond memories, but other than that, zero. Looking at the map and feeling, wow, this place feels like Mars and so far from home. And somebody early in my journey through the mat said, neurosurgery is a culture of, it's a cult of personality. And they said it doesn't matter so much the institution, it matters the culture and the personality who trains you. And I thought, okay, that's interesting advice. So I met Spetzler, I met Sontag, and I saw the whole BNI thing, and you know, the rest is history. I just
Yeah, I believe in that. I believe in these schools of neurosurgery. I think neurosurgeons like to tell you where they came from, and they can trace their lineage back to different and specific individuals because there are these schools in neurosurgery. I think, or schools of neurosurgery. It happens a little bit in cardiac surgery and some of the other, I think historically in the general surgical specialties where people could trace themselves back to some of the pioneers in general surgery. But neurosurgeons we're a small group, and we're very, very cognizant of where we came from. But some of us, like you included, are really cognizant of where we're going. And so it's exciting to see what you've done and built on what, you know, Robert and Volker had done at the Barrow with now the young people you're expanding it to not only the people that have the, you know, the luck or the privilege to be physically at the Barrow, but also to be a much larger group that can be pulled into the sort of the Barrow way of learning. It's a way of learning, really.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think when I think about who I am as a surgeon and why I am that way, it's because of the one or two key people who mentored me, and that has no bearing on the institution, really. I mean, if just because you're at, you know, some Ivy League medical center or some fancy academic place, it's not going to guarantee that you'll find that special mentor. And so I think the advice I got was actually pretty good. You got to try and anticipate who do you kind of want to fall in with, and who do you want to be mentored by, and you go seek that person. And it's interesting because, as you say, these schools of neurosurgery, like when I think about my life after my training, it's still that way. Like I went off to, you know, hang out with Juha Hernesniemi in Helsinki and learn from him. I've learned so much from Rokuya Tanikawa in Sapporo. These are places that I barely even knew about, but it's the personality and the person, and I think that's the magic. Is, you know, there are these people that come along, whether they're surgeons or athletes or stars in whatever their field is. They're what you seek. You've got to find them and find a way to connect with them. And, you know, I think that's what makes us who we are.
Now, I don't remember when we officially met. We didn't train together. I know that we had some common friends, and I think it was the travel club that sort of pulled us initially together. And I think we met at the travel club and realized that there was a lot more synergy here than, say, with, you know, some of the other groups.
Yeah, well, we met through the travel club, specifically Nick Theodore. Nick and I are very close because when I was chief, we lost a resident, and we had a void in the program, and we needed somebody to come in and as a PGY3 and fill the void. And Nick was right there, and I love Nick.
Larger than life.
Larger than life. We managed to pull him in, and when Nick became chief long after I had left, you and he were chief and fellow together.
Oh, what a time! Yeah.
So that was our love triangle, and that's how we met.
Yeah.
And honestly, I hope I don't embarrass you, but you're one of the biggest blessings in my life because your friendship is incredible. I value it, and our families do things together all the time. Our kids are close, our wives are close, and I feel like we go through life and we're blessed with only so many key friendships, and I'm lucky to have you.
Yeah, I would echo the same thing. Obviously, our relationship and our friendship is a very, very important thing for me, and it's really allowed a lot of development for me personally and professionally that I wouldn't otherwise have had had I not had someone that I could bounce some of my worst ideas off of over the years. Yeah, so I'm grateful for that. You mentioned that you went to this really big high school and you weren't, playing any varsity sports, and I'm not sure if you played any varsity sports at Brown. But so when did you become this, you certainly have this athleticism about you, and certainly Robert, obviously, we associate with great athleticism, and it's part of the Barrow culture as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? Talk about your own personal journey as far as, it's a type of competitiveness, but in a way, it's for yourself. It's an internal competitiveness that I see, that I sense.
Well, yeah, I first of all, I like to stay in shape, so that's partly why I do it. But I think I've always viewed neurosurgery as a sport rather than like an intellectual thing, and that was through my training with Robert and Volker. And so part of just the surgeon's mentality is to always keep yourself in good shape. But I think, part of what I love about my routines is that every day I can count on 1 hour just to get out there and have time to myself and think. And when I'm on my mountain bike or running the trails, I'm processing life, and I'm thinking about something I'm trying to write, or some speech I've got to give, or something is like getting me churning, and that's what gives me energy. And I see it in you too. Like your creative expression is music. Like you love like music and the history of music and your knowledge of that, and I see it in the readings that you do. I think all of us have this thing where inside it kind of stirs our creative energy. And I just find that when I'm out exercising, I can feel that creative energy stirring. And that's part of what I love about it. And the offshoot or the byproduct is I stay in good shape, but it's really about that kind of mental calm.
Yeah, for me, it's the daydreaming that happens when you dissociate from the actual task that you're doing. It's fascinating, but it's part of the Barrow culture as well, though. It's not just, yes, obviously it's part of you as an individual, but I think you've continued with some of these great Barrow traditions, Hike from Hell, the Rim to Rim, these things that, again, others are drawn to them because they associate them with being part of the Barrow family, right?
Yeah. Well, Spetzler was an incredibly competitive person, and Volker fueled that competition. Like the two of them were on each other all the time. It could be as simple as like the number of Christmas cards hanging on their door every year to a foosball match and a cocktail party. And I think for those of us who were kind of reared in that environment, we unfortunately inherited a lot of that competitiveness. So the Barrow mentality is we got to be first. We got to be the best. And so part of that training mentality is, how can I train harder? How can I make sure that I'm first and that we're the best? And that's a good thing. It keeps us always striving. It keeps us always trying to be creative and innovative. And so, yeah, that has woven itself into our culture, and it's almost so ever present that we don't even think about why or where.
You're taking care of some really, really sick people, and you have to one, have the appreciation of life and the things outside of the hospital to really commit yourself to this preservation, right? There's a sacrifice. There's a sacrifice of lifestyle. I mean, because I think you have to work very, very hard. But I think there's a commitment. There's a commitment and a contract with the people that we take care of. And the athleticism, the competitiveness, the camaraderie, all these things allow us to do that better. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think we have a really high standard. I think a lot of programs do. The standards are set by these great leaders. Like at NYU, you've got John and you've got Pat Kelly and Ransohoff and these legends, and we have our legends in Phoenix, and every place has that. And I think part of that drive is you want to try and reach for the highest rung and try and match the standard.
But it's a healthy competitiveness. It's not malignant. It's not malicious. And I think that's also the special thing about the Barrow is the genuine nature of making everyone better, not necessarily at the expense of an individual, but really to hold up the group. It's holding everybody up. You're holding everyone up to a higher standard, but the group is holding itself up to take care of people and to be better.
Totally. Yeah, I remember you would watch your peers getting better, and that wanting to stay with them, it just drives everybody up, and so you can all feel good about it. And when you're writing the papers together, you're all getting the authorship together, so it's just this rising tide that lifts all boats.
Yeah, no, I think that at least in my career now, it's more about helping the people below me, do things and achieve what they want to achieve.
Yeah, I for many years I was fixated on metrics, like how many papers and how many whatever. But it's like now what matters is, okay, who will carry the torch? How many people can I influence as a mentor? And the other thing that I think matters a lot is just what things of permanence can you leave behind? And that's where buildings and programs and other things like that start to have special meaning.
Well, you've definitely left, and you're by no means done, but you've definitely left a playbook for young people that are interested in open vascular neurosurgery. But what's next? We're talking about a 7th book, I know, right? 7 of the 7, right?
7 squared.
7 squared. We're getting to the 7th book, but really, what's next? Where's your head now?
Well, one of the things that the 7 Cavernomas book did for me was to help rethink about just what I do and the brain, those two ideas together. Like all the vascular neurosurgery that we do, we're like staying out of the brain and not entering the tissue by design, but we're not really understanding the brain and how it actually is working. And I really feel like that's our greatest imperative now. Like we have the best window of anybody in the world to figure that out, better than the neuroscientists, better than the computer scientists. So we need to figure that out. And I would love to understand like all these brain networks, all the wirings, how mental health relates to those different networks. And that to me is kind of the next.
And how to rewire.
And how to rewire, yeah. That's what's next, is figuring that stuff out.
You're getting back to your engineering.
Exactly.
You're getting back to your engineering background, that machine-brain interface. How to wrap it up? I think when I finished, and I went into Robert's office, and I wanted to say goodbye. He said, "We don't say goodbye." He said, "We're friends," which at the time, I didn't completely understand, because here I was a trainee, saying goodbye to this person that I had come to learn, and I did learn a tremendous amount from. But he said we don't say goodbye, and that was the beginning of a great friendship. You and I have this great friendship, and the friendship has allowed all these other things in our lives to happen, that we benefit from, not only in neurosurgery, but personally. We travel, our families are in sync. I mean, your children, call me or call my kids or my wife, independent. These relationships have sort of spiraled over. So, we our relationship just keeps cooking along. It's one of the great things that we have here. Yeah. I was flattered when you asked me to come and do the interview, but then I thought, well, who else could give it? I mean, who else could do it? I mean, it could only have been me.
Well, so
who are the other candidates?
when I did this for Robert, and right. I thought, okay, the way this works is you have the leader in neurosurgery, which is the title of the series, and then you have the junior guy right. interview the leader. And I thought, well, I really love Howard, and I want to do this with Howard because I love Howard. But how is he going to feel if I invite him to be the guy interviewing me? Because we're peers. There's not that difference. And so it means a lot to me that you would do this for me. And I enjoyed it. I love you. And this has been great.
Right. But I'm not, I don't sense a competition between us because we're very different in a lot of ways. But I value this relationship tremendously, as I know you do. But I feel that there's nothing I could have not asked you because I felt uncomfortable or whatever. I mean, I think I was the perfect person to do it, actually.
Yeah, in fact, you could have asked a lot of questions that could have been a lot more embarrassing. So
no,
thank you.
No, we're not going to do that. We would never do that. But I think that you've done. I admire you. I admire everything that you've done from day one. I remember visiting you in San Francisco, sitting in an office that was smaller than this, like these 4 chairs. I think it was the smallest office I had ever seen, and that's coming from New York, where the offices are small. You had this tiny office, and you were working on these manuscripts of your books and all that. You already, that's why I brought up the 5-year plan. You've always been like this. You have this ability to focus and to lay out from point A to point B, and you can see it, and you can see it out, and that is the amazing thing about your intellect and the power of your intellect and how you've translated it into a language of neurosurgery that everyone can understand. You've given a set of tools to a bunch of young people now, and older people and established people who probably would never admit it, in front of you or on camera. You've given a set of rules or guidelines that they can follow that can make them better. And that's a great gift. That's a great talent to be able to do that. And you're unique in a lot of ways in that regard. You can focus your intellect to do that and then put it in a form that others can understand. And that's fantastic and amazing. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And when you were describing that, it made me think of when you came and visited me in my little shoebox office, and then I took you down to the operating room, which was built circa 1970, and there's just shelves and debris and everything all over in San Francisco. And when you asked me what made me decide to leave, I remember thinking, I could finally leave my shoebox and this dilapidated OR and go to this really nice place and be in that kind of environment.
Well, and where you belong. I mean, you did great things in San Francisco, and great things still go on in San Francisco, and certain things happen in a place like San Francisco, but the Barrow is your home.